People of Reddit, what stupid rule at your work or school backfired beautifully? Story 1. I was working as a medical assistant at a private medical clinic. Our clinic manager wouldn't allow the new receptionist to drive to the bank to deposit cash. Made her walk, carrying the money bag, so that she couldn't drive away with the money. Bizarre, I know. That went on for a few weeks. Then the receptionist was mugged, and over $1,000 in cash was stolen. She was allowed to drive after that. Story 2. I worked for this company that had mandatory 1 hour lunch breaks. Since we ate on the premises, our lunch break was often 15 minutes or so. We tried negotiating, having shorter lunch breaks so we could leave earlier and beat traffic. Next day, an email was sent from the team stating the fixed work and break hours for the whole team, and they were to be followed with no exceptions. Cool. Next week, a big client called about halfway through our lunch and nobody moved. It rang and rang until the owner took the call, talked to them, and immediately came to scold us. Sorry, boss. As per your rules, we were off at 1 p.m. No exceptions. A couple of weeks later, we did some work on site for the same client. They were, to be honest, one of the coolest clients I've ever had in my life. They took us out to lunch, and while talking, we ended up relaying the owner's role. They had a big chuckle over it, and while the project lasted, they made a point to always call when we were at lunch break just to annoy the owner. Story 3. I worked at Starbucks for like 5+ years before and during undergrad. And at one point, our district manager thought it was a good idea to implement a just say yes policy, where we literally weren't allowed to tell the customer no. It lasted for about 3 months, and in those 3 months, our unaccounted product and waste went up over 300% because when the POS didn't have a way to punch in a customer request, we had to just do it anyways. We also got complaints from stores in surrounding districts because they had angry customers who were requesting things that were against the local food service code and told them that we did it for them at our store. I knew exactly how that policy was going to play out, and I just laughed every time management was freaking out about the problems it was causing. Story 4. The bottom floor of the secondary school was a square that had corridors all the way around. After some incidents where a kid got knocked over, they implemented a one-way system. Unfortunately, they were very strict about enforcing it. If you accidentally walked past your class, you couldn't just turn around. They seemed very proud of their new rule, until everyone started showing up late for class because they had to do extra laps of the bottom floor. Story 5. A chemistry class, we had plastic bottles of distilled water that could be squeezed to produce a small jet of water. We used to spray one another's crotches to make it look like you'd pee yourself. To counter this, our teacher introduced the punishment to anyone caught spraying or having been sprayed. Hence, if you could spray someone and get away with it, they would have wet trousers and have to write excerpts from a Martin Luther King speech. Needless to say, the punishment for being sprayed was quickly abolished. Story 6. My high school principal was known for sending girls home to change if their bra straps were showing. In my sophomore year, he tried to send one of my classmates home, but she was like, nah, I've got a change of clothes. No need to send me home. So she went to the bathroom, took her bra off, and made a show of putting it in her locker. The principal was pissed, but she couldn't do anything about it since she was technically following the dress code. It became a thing, like hundreds of high school girls removing their bra at school or just showing up braless as a big fuck you to the principal. Story 7. Back in 2011, a company I worked for had the bright idea to block all social networks because, employees should work instead of slacking off on Facebook. I could write volumes of books on the toxic culture in that place, but the owner-president, who lived in a different country and visited about once every few months, was universally feared by everyone. And a few days before his arrival, the whole building went into panic mode. So a few weeks after the social network ban, His Royal Highness shows up. And 5 minutes later, half of the IT department is scrambling to his office. Apparently, there was an issue with the Wi-Fi, or at least that's what he figured, since he couldn't log on to Facebook. It was fixed in seconds. A few years and 3 promotions later, I make a joke about it with him. Instead of a laugh, I get a confused look. Turns out he still thinks it was some internet problem, since whoever decided to ban social networks didn't have the balls to tell him about it after the incident. Story 8. The grocery store I work at is now required to charge 5 cents for plastic bags. Because of this, we have a lot of customers requesting paper bags. Since our paper bags are sucky, we typically double bag them so they don't rip. Well, one day the store manager sees a cashier doubling paper bags and yells at them because paper bags are more expensive and we can't afford to double bag them. So now we have a new rule. You can't double bag paper bags unless they're really heavy. Fast forward a couple of weeks and my bagger is using single paper bags. Right as the store manager walks by, the bagger picks up one of the bags that wasn't even that heavy and it rips right open, right in front of the manager. We're allowed to double bag them now. Story 9. I worked in a call center, and we had a similar clock system, except we were allowed to arrive 5 minutes early and then get on the phones at their scheduled time. One girl figured out they would pay for those 5 minutes. She started clocking in earlier and earlier until she was arriving an hour early and sitting around for an hour every day, 5 extra hours of overtime every week, for close to a year or more until she quit, with no one in management catching wind. Story 10. I went to a strict Catholic school with uniforms. The kids in 4th through 8th grade had to wear belts until we got a new principal who made it mandatory for all the kids in the school to wear belts. After many bathroom accidents from kindergartners and 1st and 2nd graders, and complaints from parents, of course, the principal rescinded her addition to the dress code. More recently, the principal was fired for embezzling money from the school. Story 11. My husband's company was like that. Despite the fact that 90% of the jobs could easily be work-from-home jobs, the CEO insisted everyone work from the office. He was so sure that if people worked from home, they'd just slack off and business would tank. Then COVID hit, and he wisely was concerned about it. A bit of a germaphobe, TBH. And in a week's time, 99% of people were working from home. Productivity is at an all-time high, and my husband has no plans on working in the office again if he can help it. It's a lot easier to get your work done in a quiet home office than it is when you have a half dozen coworkers trying to ask you questions or chat with you. Story 12. Boss bitched and complained that we all, welders and millwrights, took lunch and breaks whenever we felt like it. Actually, just when we got the chance, and implemented a rule that if you didn't take your break or lunch at the right time, you didn't get them. Myself and another welder got sent to do a repair that was about a 2-hour drive from the shop, first thing in the morning. The boss said it was going to be a quick fix, so we didn't bring our lunches. We needed the machine running ASAP because downtime was costing $250,000 an hour. Turns out this quick fix was a pretty major welding job and required us to completely rebuild a motor mount. The operator knew this and had told the boss that was when it needed to be done. Well, guess what, boss man? If you had just let us take our lunches and breaks when we wanted, or had at least told us what the actual job was, we wouldn't have driven 2 hours to the job, done 1 hour of work, driven another 2 hours back to the shop, eaten lunch at noon like we were supposed to, and then driven 2 hours back to the job to finish it. Story 13. My school banned people from carrying their bags around during the day, so we had to rent lockers to keep our books in. One kid got around this and brought his books into school in a microwave, which he carried around for the day. He left the school within the month. Story 14. My mother was an elementary school teacher. For years, the teacher's be quiet signal was holding up one hand in a peace sign. Well, the principal decided that this didn't have enough meaning and invented her own. At a staff meeting, she explained that her new sign stood for ears listening, eyes looking, and lips locked. She then made an L with her index finger and thumb and held it in front of her forehead. This principal didn't take criticism well, so none of the staff members were willing to tell her that she was making the loser sign. And so the new sign was taught to the children. Most of them made fun of it. Some of the more sensitive ones got upset by it. Overall, it was a disaster, and within a few weeks, they went back to the peace sign.